Good morning, everyone. This is the first video back after our Easter break, and this term we're going to be doing a number of different things on Sunday mornings for you. We're going to be doing some interviews, we're going to be doing some teaching, and Mark Gibbons is going to be tackling some of those tricky questions that you maybe have about your faith. This morning, kicking it off, we're going to have our first interview, and this is going to be Mike Ford from church, who I'm interviewing. So without any further ado, enjoy the interview.
There we go. So Mike, thanks very much for agreeing to be my interviewee this morning and for answering some of these questions. So my first question, Mike, is just tell us a little bit about your home context growing up, where you grew up, your family, things like that.
Yeah, no problem. Well, I grew up on the outskirts of Wolverhampton and Kings Winford, which is near Stourbridge, so not very far from here. So my family was mum and dad, me and my younger sister, Lynn. And there was a 3 to 4 year age gap. So I didn't hang out with my sister that much.
Right.
So we did quite different things. Both houses were very near to open fields, woods, streams, waste ground, all that kind of stuff. So I did spend a lot of time outside, kind of running wild with my friends and exploring. So I did quite a lot of that stuff. My family were only really nominally Christian, so they would say that they were C of E. But actually, they never really went to church. We were never taken to church, except for weddings and funerals. I didn't really get much Christian input at all, other than from what we would have had in those days from school assemblies or RE lessons.
Okay. So how and when did you become a Christian?
Well, that's a bit of a story. But I would say late teens. I kind of I got a sense of me in a strange way needing to worship. That's how I'd say it now, but I wouldn't have said that then. But it was kind of, and I don't mean worship in terms of singing songs. I mean, kind of acknowledging that there's something else out there that was bigger than me, and that was worthy of me giving it my attention. And it was kind of a gut thing, that really. But when I got to university and I explored this whole thing in me of wanting to worship, and I found that mostly I was attracted to Islam. And what attracted me to Islam mostly was that it appeared to me to be very straightforward in terms of, these are the rules that you need to follow. If you follow these rules, you'll be sorted. So that's quite an interesting thought, between James and myself. But so that was attractive. But then I had the Christians sort of beginning to explain to me the unique claims of Jesus and who he was and what his claims to be as the Son of God, and what his intentions were for us as human beings. And in the end, cutting a long story short, I realized it wasn't about rules. It was actually about relationship. By this time, I'd left university. I was working, so I was in my early 20s, mid 20s. And I'd been to some churches. I got Christian friends who were influencing me. But being very independently minded and wanting to think these things through for myself, I had to get there myself, really. So I read, I talked, I listened, I understood. And eventually I got to the point where I knew that, what Jesus was saying was the truth. And I knew that I had to accept him, and I had to move from me being completely self-driven to allowing him to take control. Okay. And that was an almighty struggle, an almighty internal struggle. I had lists of for and lists against and all sorts. I tried to rationalize it with my mind, like I do. But in the end, it wasn't just a mind thing. It was a whole person thing. I had to sort of accept him as the way, the truth, and the life, which is what he claims. So I did that. I did that in a bedroom in a rented place I was living in at the time. and I went off to church, and I got stuck
rest
in.
is
The rest is
history,
history.
Yeah. So, okay, you I appreciate that you were a bit older when you became a Christian, than sort of being a child and being at home. But even so, you would have still have relationship with your parents, with your sister. What was it like being a Christian in the context of the fact that you grew up without major Christian influences?
In all honesty, it wasn't that difficult with my family. I don't think they really understood. Well, my mum and dad didn't really understand what the difference was with me. So it's kind of coming to them and saying, I now really am a Christian. It wasn't a thing that happened to me when I was a baby, because they had me christened as an infant. So trying to explain how I'd moved was difficult because they didn't understand. Most of the struggles were internal. I mean, I'm sure it's just the same now as it was then, but it wasn't easy to sort of stick your head above the parapet amongst your peers, amongst your family, and say, I'm a Christian, this is what I believe, because they thought you were either some weirdo or the Moonies had got you, as we used to say, or it was hard to be different. But I didn't get very much opposition, not like maybe for some people around the rest of the world, or other parts of the world. And I think probably the most difficult thing is being able to know how to approach trying to explain yourself and trying to be helpful. And I think when I was young, I was quite clumsy. I would have, sort of said, "Oh, you need to read this. You need to see this scripture. You need to understand this," and sort of maybe a bit sort of too driven by, what other Christians would say. "Oh, you should be out there witnessing. You should be out there evangelizing." And I think I'll now know that you really should just be out there being yourself, and being Jesus as he letting him bring out the real you, and not trying to apply a formula that everybody else might think is the best way.
So last question then, Mike, is looking back, if you were to speak to say a 16-year-old or 20-year-old Mike, what advice would you give? What would you say?
It was a very self-driven life, which is kind of the thin end of the wedge where sin is concerned. If you just do everything to suit yourself, or you're so independent that you just satisfy your own needs, it's a very self-centered life. And I kind of what that led to was quite a narrow way of thinking. Right. So I was quite narrow in the things that I enjoyed, quite narrow in tastes, whether it's music or books and stuff like that, and the kind of people that I associated with. So I feel that I kind of missed out on the richness that could have been there if I'd understood who Jesus was and what that meant for me in my life. So I'd say to myself, looking back, I would have encouraged myself to be much more open and to be much more explorative in with people and what people think, and just being more open to what God has to offer, really. And I would have said to myself, and I probably wouldn't have taken this easily, but I would have said, be less afraid to be different, be less afraid to be yourself, and to front up, but much easier said than done.
Sure, but good advice nonetheless. Yeah, good advice. Mike, really, really appreciate you taking the time to
no problem.
to be with us this morning, and I'm sure what you've said and the experiences that you've shared will bless young people. So. And it definitely blessed me. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
okay. No problem. Thanks, James.
Thank you.
So we hope you've really enjoyed that interview with Mike Ford this morning. There's going to be other interviews coming up in the coming weeks of different people within our church congregation, all with different stories and different experiences to share with you. If you've got any comments or thoughts following watching this video, please feel free to post them on the WhatsApp group, and we'll be sending out another video next week.